That brings us to the end of our lecture. Thank you very much for being here. But we can have a Q&A if you have any questions. I don't know if I can answer them brilliantly, but I'll try. Any questions, any comments?
If I could start and maybe give them some time to. Thank you first very much for the spectrum of films you've shown us, and from mainstream to documentary to films from other parts of South Asia. I was wondering if how the perception of films made in South Asia has probably changed, if at all, in the global scenario.
So actually, in the last, I think, 3 years, I've been very lucky. I've been on something called the Asia Pacific Screen Awards, which is given in Australia and Brisbane, APSA Awards, which is given to the best films in 70 Asian countries. And I think I was personally very, very delighted. I think it was a year ago. All the top 5 categories, like best film, were not at all from the big film producing countries of India and China and Korea and Japan. They were all these really tiny minnow countries. So Sri Lanka, there was Palestine. There was this wonderful film, Omar, from Palestine. Have you seen it? Was at Cannes. It had films from Iraqi Kurdistan, you know. I mean, so these are from Kazakhstan. So these were among the top guys beating the big elephants, the Indias that make thousands of films, and the Koreas and the Japans, which have massive industries, and China and state funding and all of that. And these are countries where where I would imagine daily life would be such a challenge. Like Iraqi Kurdistan is not even a country that exists except to itself. I mean, it's not even officially recognized by most countries in the world. And I don't know what kind of an economy they have. It would be so vulnerable, let alone a film industry, let alone make masterpieces, right? So it's, I think it was a real big lesson to us. I kind of sensed it, but it's a different thing to see so many films at a stretch, which is why it's a big honor to be on these juries, but it's really privileged education to see. And it really puts the context, it's like Bollywood thinks it's like the cat's whiskers. And actually, of course, there's so much great stuff in the regional languages that's going that is way, way, way ahead of Bollywood in every sense, in subject and talent and technical talent and all of that. And it's only when you look at the bigger picture, you see where you stand. So I think this was a big eye-opener for me.
Mentioned regional films also growing big. You have Lucia, you had Court that did very well both internationally and got released here. So what do you think why do you think these films are doing well all over India and abroad, rather than just, for example, Court, Lucia going, I mean, even though they're regional films, and how come they're appealing to a global audience now? Or is it just that perhaps access has improved? Is it that more people are watching these films, or is it a combination of all of this?
I think it has to be a combination, because I think regardless of one cog in the wheel moving, I think actually it really has to have the whole ecosystem going to actually get a film out there. So I think in Lucia or several others, they found producers that would back very unusual scripts or daring or risk-taking scripts. But I mean, like I mentioned about Pawan, really aggressively, it takes a real certain kind of mind space to, like this new film, if you look at the website, I'm not sure I have the title right, it's C10H14N2 or something. Basically, it's the chemical formula of nicotine, don't ask me, look it up on the web. But then it has this, again, crowdfunded, and it says it reached 2 crore from, 865 guys. And I asked him, I said, do you really have, how you have some guy answering all their emails, because it's like a Facebook-driven thing and, internet-driven thing. And he said, well, he thought about it. And actually, he said, whoever did it for me, that the audience, the guy would catch it, right, if it wasn't Pawan. So he said that was the whole point. Oh, Pawan wrote me back, or whatever, that he thought that was one of the things that would interest them. And then he said he would be filming stuff, and in the evening, be really exhausted and answering all these emails himself. He said 4 email accounts and answering emails during the shoot, like every day. It really takes a particular kind of energy and a mind space to be making films like that, right? And he's doing it again with his second film. So it also takes a kind of, just these creative spaces actually fed by so much else. And I think you increasingly need different kinds of multitasking skills to really make the film you want. I mean, it all, as well goes for the marketing people, as well goes for the exhibition, and to generate the audiences and that kind of one-to-one connection to build a loyalty to see your film. So I think the younger generation is willing to go all out and do what it takes to make a great film, to stick to their vision, because I think it's also a question of, it's not a question of, oh God, thank God, I finally found a producer who will fund my film. But it's also what often happens is when the first film is, you find a producer to make your first film, and then in the second film, you already realize, a lot of them have realized I'm not a filmmaker. That, oh my God, because then you don't really have creative control of your film, and you pawn your wife's Mangal Sutra and say, no, I need to put in some money. So you have some kind of creative control on your film, so you're a co-producer. So So I think it just brings in many other elements which have nothing to do only with artistry that you need to deal with.
And do you think it's going to take a lot more time for documentaries to begin to see this kind of a wide audience that fiction films have now beginning to see, independent films?
Well, I hope they do, because I've been an India and South Asia consultant to the Berlin Festival for about 17 years now. So I've really seen that space evolve over the decades. And I have to say that for a long time, I think the documentary films that we make in India are way, way, way ahead of a lot of the fiction films that we make. And that's not only because of the budget, because it's easy to say, oh, the budget is small, so you can take more risks, et cetera, et cetera. But I think just actively engaging with issues, having new things to say, saying it with different ways of treating the narrative, shooting it differently. Even a film like, well, it's a fiction film. Yeah, but documentaries are really, I find, look at what Char was doing. It was, because it's not fiction, it doesn't have Shah Rukh Khan or any other big star in it. It can, you can actually explore a lot of things that you might discuss with your friends, for example, but you can't actually show it in a film, or have the space to discuss the nuances in a film, or have that kind of time, the kind of things. Actually, in one of the scenes, he has one of these small boys, like Rubel, the guy who does the smuggling, and his parents are saying, he asked the dad, like, don't you think you're really putting too much responsibility on this small kid? Or the bugger doesn't do enough for us. He's like all he's doing is, and totally abandoning parental responsibility. It takes a long time to develop that kind of intimacy with your subject, that they'll tell you things like this to camera, right? The father saying horrendous things, or the son about their own father, because after the filmmaker goes, you're going to be living with them, right? So to invest that kind of time. So usually they've been far ahead, and I think documentary filmmakers struggle all over the world, including India. But I think, well, we've had some films that were shown in theaters. I don't know, how did you have any run other than private screenings, Deepa? How has it gone with, for example, Invoking Justice? What kind of audiences had it had here?
No, I think in India to get an actual theatrical release is very tough for a documentary.
Yes.
And of course some filmmakers have tried it, but it's because they've tried it because they've actually spent money on, and that's not how it should work.
Right.
So you don't have, PVR will show it if you pay.
Correct.
That's absurd. Which documentary filmmaker can do that,
How does it work with Vikalp? I think it's at Everest you have? Do you have
They're
to pay?
right here. The Vikalp people are right.
Do you have someone from Vikalp? Please. How does it work at Everest? Do you have to pay, or how does it work?
We are very lucky because we have a person in the owner of Everest Theatre who wants to give his space for a documentary film once a month.
Okay.
So he changes his film every Friday, and the last Thursday of every month or any other Thursday he gives us to show films.
What kind of slot do you have for usually?
7 o'clock in the evening. So very good slot, one slot. We don't charge the audience anything, and he doesn't charge us anything.
Yeah. And then, of course, there were spaces on television and so on, but it's bound to be pockets, but this is not just India, this is documentaries anywhere in the world. It's always bound to be a niche until, it becomes a wider... And I think also, there's like docu-fiction and all these many, many, many layers, and even fiction films becoming very close to docu and cinema verite and all that. And I think the traditional boundaries are getting far more blurred, so I think that's a good sign. So. Yeah,
and I think, what we learned from Vikalp is that...
Can we give another hand to Sunanda Bhatt, who's here with us? There's this wonderful film. I've seen only one of us called, and who will...
Have you seen that?
Have you seen the Arana? Wonderful film, please.
No, I think with through Vikalp, what we see is that if you have a good screening space and you kind of, follow up with the screenings, then you can build up an audience, and the audience is there to watch interesting films. It's not about, they are there to watch only films which have made it big, So we have anywhere between a minimum of 70 to 400 people coming for each screening.
Fantastic.
So the last screening was a film called Amin, an Iranian film, which was released some years back by Shaheen. And it's a slow film, it's a 2-hour film, but people liked it. They sat through it and, asked for DVDs later. So, I think, but the only problem, I think, in India is that the filmmakers have to take the initiative to, get their film screened and create screening spaces, and would be great if it moves on, from there.
I think there's pockets of, please, please.
No, but I just want to say one thing because, I just want to say the way she framed the question, right? Because we are always having to, in a way, justify why we exist, Because if the norm is mainstream cinema and if the norm is a theatrical release, and I'd like to say that many documentary spaces exist, screening spaces exist, which are outside this theatrical space.
Right.
And in fact, documentaries have a tremendous shelf life, unlike commercial cinema, which, you get 2 weeks and then you're out. So I think we should really revisit this way of pitting us against, as if we have no legitimacy unless our films are shown in a theater. So I'd just like to put it on its head because, I would say that certain films, if you look at, just look at Anand Patwardhan's Ram Ke Naam, okay? From 92, we are in 2015, and every 5 years or every 6 years, that film is revisited in a new context and screened again, millions of times. And none of these screening experiences or the way documentaries return and are shown and are discussed and spoken about ever seem to be legitimate or ever seem to be valid or never considered as if we are impacting on viewers or on thinking or on attitudes. So I'm just saying it as a way that just to throw it into the mix right here,
Yeah. In fact, since Deepa had made this comment, I'd also like to mention that one of her films was shown earlier many years ago. Kya Hua is Sheher Ko. It was shown many years ago in Berlin. And then they have, well, this connects with a lot of other issues, but they have a section in Berlin called the International Forum of New Cinema. And I think one of the privileges of working with Berlin is that it's one of the very few A-list festivals for whom a documentary is every bit as important and as prestigious as a fiction film. You don't have so many A-list festivals doing that. They still are media circuses with stars and all that stuff. But Berlin really also, it's in its orientation and history is a very political festival, so they respect it differently. So that actually shown Deepa's film earlier some years ago. And then when there was another context, so they have archives, a lot of archival films, and they have a program called Living Archives where they want to make archival films relevant. It's like she was saying, even older films relevant to the community today. And they wanted to show Kya Hua is Sheher Ko again, and then there was no print in India of that film. Deepa didn't have a good print of that film. And then we had to look at the old German one because they had an old print. They had preserved it in the archives with German subtitles. And the lots of trouble they took to actually invest money in making a new print. Wow. It's like, can you imagine our guys investing money in striking a new print of a documentary? It was a 35mm print, right? And then 16mm. And then they brought it to Prasad Labs in Chennai, and they had to clear out the German subtitles, put English ones. So they really took a lot of effort because they believe in that film. And it's a documentary, and to them it's not at all any lesser. It's every bit as important as a fiction film. So, yes, in today's context, exactly. Yeah.
So my question is, after being programmer for so many years, why do you think our filmmakers are not able to crack it to a big festival, and small spaces like Iran or Lithuania or all these countries are able to have their films regularly? What do we lack? What is that Indian filmmakers lack when compared to these filmmakers from smaller countries?
It's hard to say. I don't think we lack anything as such. I think, we have actually had a huge presence at festivals, and a lot of them, I think it's important to take note of it. A lot of them are first-time filmmakers. A lot of the recent films that you see at the top festivals at Cannes, Berlin, Venice are first-time filmmakers. So you had Masan this year, you had Udan some years ago, Vikramaditya Motwane, you had, tons of films, I'm blurring now. But really a lot of first films. So in an earlier generation who have felt, oh God, I need to be 70 and gray in the hair, if anything beyond Satyajit Ray has to be of that stature, otherwise you won't get in. And actually the truth is, it's a lot of first-time filmmakers are, and I think partly the reason for that is, of course, the talent for sure, but I think there's a larger sense of what's going on elsewhere on the planet. I think there's a sense of the languages in which other filmmakers tell their stories in other countries, which actually, brings us back to the example that I just gave of Iraqi Kurdistan making masterly films. Like you can't get those images out of your head. Yeah, and these are in like war-torn, like, you know, they probably struggle to feed their children bread or to get water from the street. They could be shot in some sniper fire. And not having an industry finding producers, but making artistic masterpieces. It's really astounding, astounding. So I think it's just a fierce determination. But I think, it's like, I would imagine everyone here is looking at films from other countries, has seen them at some point, or in other languages that, other than Kannada and Tamil, yeah, so, or Hindi. So I think that gives you a wider understanding of how other people tell their stories, and you're not telling your story in the old way. And it's also engaging with audiences who are all looking at everything on Facebook and internet and video games. And I think video games, I'm horrified, but I suspect a lot of the world is going that way visually. Yeah, I think the smart guys of the future, the guys who invent video games. Last week I was with a family that had a small kid, and the minute he comes back from school, he's like at end of school, he immediately puts on this incredibly sophisticated football game where there's Messi and whoever, totally lifelike. They laugh, or they're attacked, or they, you know, grimace in the same way. There's incredible detail of their shadows as their bodies are moving so fast and, you know, twisting their bodies, and they're super. You don't have to pay that much attention to a detail for a kiddie video game on football, but it is so sophisticated. And even the intonation of the crowd clapping when a goal is made, it's not a cut and paste sound. There's like, they roar in different intensities and pitches, and I'm thinking, my God, like somebody is doing it with such love and attention to detail. You wouldn't have, you know, like, okay, some kid in fifth standard is looking at it. But it's incredibly, and like kind of a live, you know, it took me a minute or two because I'm not hot on video games, and is that a video game? Is that live? I couldn't tell. So it's not to dismiss video games, but really I think it's looking at all these other, many other talents in sound, in video, in, I don't know, what is it called? Is it animatronics or some such thing, whatever. You know, and all the stuff that's also coming into Indian cinema. What did they do with Kochadaya? What is it called? Motion picture cap, motion something or the other. Where they have these little light diodes or whatever they call attached to the body to figure out the way the body moves. And then they superimpose animation and real action, rotoscopy. So it's a lot of stuff already in our mainstream cinema, Rajnikant. So, yeah. Yes, please.
I just want to know, why is it taking so long for our country to bring documentary to the mass audiences? Because we have a lot of infrastructure today in terms of, if you're talking about spaces, you have multiplexes and you have a lot of infrastructure done today. So isn't it high time that the mass audiences can access documentary cinema? Because we do have a lot of documentary filmmakers, but we're not able to bring it across to, why can't a person choose to go watch a documentary film in a theater than, say, a Karan Johar film? Okay.
So we kind of dealt with that a little bit earlier, but let me tell you from my personal, because I'm not a docu-filmmaker, so I'm not the right person to answer that question. But in my personal response is, for example, from my work experience for Berlin, I look at all kinds of films. I look at fiction, feature films, I look at documentaries, I look at shorts, I look at animation, I look at experimental films. So there are no labels to it. It doesn't, oh, it's a docu or it's a fiction or it's a this or that. I don't look at it, I mean, the label is totally irrelevant. I look at everything. So I come up with a totally different space because it's my work and I really love it. And you can have masterpieces in 5 minutes. Or you can have masterpieces in docu which are far more stimulating and engaging than a fiction feature, right? So to me, so mine is not an average audience response. But what I would say is, I think one of the crucial things, I mean, like it's a whole ecosystem. It has to work as the producer, as the filmmaker, as the audience, as the distributor, exhibitor, all of that has to work to actually put this out. But I would like to say that one of the thrilling things about Berlin, and I think it's not always taken seriously at a lot of film festivals or film fora, to me the Q&A after is absolutely crucial. It can be 5 minutes or 10 minutes. But I think it's very, very crucial to developing this culture of asking questions about cinema, of engaging with the filmmaker, finding out his personal views, of saying, oh, I asked for Asghar Farhadi and he answered me. You know, like whoever. You might have stars or, you know. So it's also partly that, but I think that actually expands the discussion a lot more, and then it can go into a chai setting where you hang out and talk more. I think the hangout spaces are very vital. I don't think we take them seriously enough. I mean, sometimes you do have Q&As, but at festivals I think that is actually the space where instead of having one viewpoint, it actually expands to many things, and you can agree or disagree violently or have a totally different, and I think those spaces are very precious and they're not always valued. I mean, for example, when a film festival makes its program, it doesn't always, all festivals don't always keep that 10, 15 minutes to have that interaction. And I think that's really a very crucial thing. Because that's where, yeah, hopefully there'll be less hierarchy, like no labels to film, but you see a film because it's good and not because it's a docu or a short or an experimental or anything. No? There was a, yeah, please.
Hello, ma'am. My name is Alia. I'm 17 years old, and my question would be is it true that the larger audience chooses to watch a movie that showcases their aspirations more than the actual truth? And is this orientation changing through the years?
You tell me. You're young. You're 17. You're beautiful. You're asking questions. What kind of movies do you go to see? Would you see? Would that be an important criteria for you?
Yes, it would be. Actually, for me.
I'm delighted you answered your question, but tell us more.
But I would love to hear you out, and then I.
No, tell me why. What would be a lovely film that you saw for you? A lovely film that was aspirational, which you enjoyed.
Aspirational is something that you see, like the glamorous cinema. Like everybody wants to be glamorous here. Like if we all have our hidden secrets inside, and then when we watch a movie, we want to unleash our within. That's why we go to the cinema and watch these movies. Sometimes we don't exactly, we are not, what do you say, we try to be oblivious of what's happening around us. Especially now, I'm seeing a change in our youth. We want to be more aware. We want to learn. We want to grow. So for that growth, I don't think cinema such as the glamorous cinema is the right choice for us. But that really depends on various other factors. So I would like to hear your view as well.
So I think, so thank you for asking that question and sharing your experience of it. I think in any culture, it just takes a mix of cinemas. It should not be one thing or the other. Whoever loves Karan Johar, please go and see a film because it's got Salman. Or, you know, when you talked of aspiration or fantasy or kind of a dream space, to me, frankly, a film like Deepa, like Invoking Justice, is what one would fantasize of a more egalitarian society in Islam or Hinduism or wherever. It could be seen as a fantasy, right? Of these women who do their own thing. They're not bothered they are bothered what the guys do, but they're inventing their own world out of the highly limited constraints. You could see it as a fantasy, as a wish fulfillment, but they're actually making it come true. So it's much more thrilling for me because it's a docu. Whereas in another culture, it might absolutely not be possible. And it's not like it's the norm everywhere in India. It's these fantastic women in Pudukkottai, right? I don't know, half of them may be illiterate or literate. I don't know. I mean, it's not like this hip, like Islam can be many things in different cultures. An Islamic woman in Turkey is very different from a woman in Indonesia or in India. It's different interpretations and liberal things that you're allowed in different interpretations of Islam. So you could see that as a fantasy, that women are the boss and calling the shots in very fundamental life decisions, in murders and divorces, like big things, not do I look cute in pink satin. It's like fundamental stuff. But that's what makes it even more exciting. The fact that it's real makes it much more exciting than if it was a Shah Rukh was in a film doing the same thing.
Yeah, but the sad part is that it's more about awareness. The audience is not aware of these kind of films. Like today I came, the prime reason why I came here is that because I wanted to learn about more cultures and like the cultural diversity within our country and around. So I came here to gain that awareness, but people aren't aware, and I'm so glad that you came here and gave this orientation to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for coming. The first thing you should do is take her email contact and put you on the mailing list for Vikalp. It's right here in your city. Yeah. If that interests you, and they show great stuff, I promise you. There's another director somewhere in the back, I don't know if he is. Gautam Sonti sitting in the last row. His film, Our Metropolis, is Usha here? No. So Gautam Sonti and Usha Rao made a wonderful film called Our Metropolis. It's a docu. It's brilliant. It's been around a bit. We'd shown it at the Dubai Festival, and it's been at many other festivals as well. And it was shown right here in Vikalp. So I think you need to connect with other filmmakers here in the room who are doing a lot of very talented things as well.
Thank you so much.
I think we're at, yeah, please. I think we can have this as the last question, then we can chat outside. Please, sir. Please. Thank you for coming.
You started with the creative spaces in South Asian cinema. That's good. Actually, all the questions actually moved from the topic to spaces for South Asian cinema. rather than creative spaces in Asian cinema. Okay, as a film festival director, I can tell you that the problem here is, one is that, as you also know, whenever we go abroad to film festivals, and the problem, yesterday also I was talking to you on that, is that about Indian cinema, the question they are generally say is that your cinema is generally targeted towards a big Indian audience. It's a big economic activity in India. You are not actually targeting, you are not even interested in putting across your cultural phenomena to the global forums. You are making films which are big, which makes big money, and you're happy with that. Therefore, when you get into a global cinema context and when you have to discuss cinema in a global context, you have your attitudes, your approach to the medium should itself change to be accepted in the global forum. I'm not talking about documentaries. Documentaries are a different genre. Fiction films, as a festival director, I have this problem. Whenever I take films from here to abroad to different festivals, they ask this question. You're not targeting this to a universal audience. You're targeting it to a particular audience to make a certain financial returns on that. And you're getting it, you should be happy about it, because yours is a very big market, huge market. Now, as we were discussing yesterday, now there are new generation of filmmakers coming up. They're looking at things in a global context. They're moving out. Like the creative spaces in South Asian cinema, most of it you show the road films.
Yeah.
People are moving from one location to another. They're understanding the, the cultural scenario of across the globe. You see, in my festival, in Bangalore International Film Festival, last 8 years I've been the organizer of this festival. Nearly 50% of the cinema I choose from South Asian films. All the films you showed today has been shown in Bangalore. But we have not responded to it the way we should respond to in Asian cinema in the international context.
So actually, I think festivals are actually playing a very crucial role in building that audience.
I have an Asian film section in the last year specifically. I had all the 28 was screened, television was screened, and all the films were screened in Bangalore right here. 3 shows, not even 1 show. 3 shows I have put all these films. But the kind of response, the attitude towards this film. In an international film festival, people are looking actually towards the European film. French film, German film, and such films, which actually, they're good. I'm not saying they're not important, they're good. They make the world cinema in a very big way. But the spaces in South Asian cinema, first we have to create within ourselves here.
Actually, I want to take your point further. What's actually happening is, because of course festivals are crucial to developing a market here, because it's when they're shown at festivals and they find an audience. But to take your point further, what's actually happening, and it partly answers Anand's question about what are Indian filmmakers lacking, it's actually changing because of the finance. So a film like Lunchbox, for example, they're finding finance in France, in Germany, in America, and that alters, it's not just the money, but of course creativity. So if France gives you money under the co-production treaty, then it says, 50% of the money you have to spend in France. So suddenly you have to get a French cinematographer or a sound editor or a color correction done there, post-production done there. And that totally fundamentally, imagine if a Kannada filmmaker were to have a French cinematographer. It would fundamentally alter what the film is going to look like, even if the director is telling him what to do. I mean, it's always a creative collaboration. So it's the money, it's becoming, it's from festivals, it's actually going forward. So traditionally, festivals were to show films, but as much as filmmakers think, oh my God, I would be so thrilled if this festival chose my film, you should know that actually the reverse is also true, and festivals are also desperately competitive to get the good films. Yeah. Because, I mean, Sir would know,
we struggle a lot to get great films and good films, and actually if it happens in my continent, in my South Asian region, I'd be very happy. In fact, so that's the best thing that can happen to International Film Festival. The focus even today, Bangalore International Film Festival is a South Asian cinema. The real focus is on that.
Yeah, so
the question is, creative spaces in South Asian cinema has grown enormously, as she pointed out. But the spaces for South Asian cinema, now Busan is doing a lot of good work for Asian cinema. There are certain organizations coming up across the globe for Asian cinema. But the acceptance is still, I'm not saying that.
I'd like to just respond to that.
Acceptance is a problem for South Asian cinema across the different festivals, whether it is Cannes or Berlin or any other festival.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, please.
I think you raised a very important point. I think what's happening is partly this is to do with the Indian market being so huge that if we never sold one film abroad, we'd really have a healthy film industry anyway. It's so huge. But what you're talking about is a challenge because it's such a splintered market. It's so regional, et cetera, et cetera. So whereas a lot of, for example, the Hong Kong film industry, its whole orientation is exactly the opposite of what India did. Till quite recently, we were not aggressively looking to sell abroad. I mean, even now, after all our efforts, it's traditionally the Indian diaspora that we reach out to. There's really not, this is what's always broken my heart. Like all along I meet filmmakers and they're always fantasizing about, oh, I want to make the crossover film, which means 2.5 goras. They want some blondies to see it. And I'm saying, boss, but crossover in India. Like the whole world wants the Indian market and the Chinese market. Here is the 1 billion population. You cross over here. Yeah, this is where the action is. How much ever you sell, whatever you do in America, how many guys will eventually get to see an Indian film? A Kannada film, Tamil film, Marathi, anything, right? They have a totally different way of filmmaking. And also the American market is like India, a huge domestic market. But they're so aggro in marketing that they make much more money through international sales than in America. But our orientation is different because of how our culture, film culture is so different.
That worry. The other aspect is that, there is a lack of, sorry, filmmakers get hurt in that. There's a lack of ambition to communicate our culture across. There's
I don't think that's
ambition.
True entirely now.
No, I know, I agree with you that I know. I'm just starting with a polemical discussion, this one, so that, they do, documentary filmmakers I'm not talking about at all. I'm talking about fiction films in this country have not actually, like, a film like Astu. The film like Astu, what happened, I had a problem in my film festival also. It got a very good review. It got a good, jury response to that and all. Ultimately, when it comes to giving an award to that, there is an opposition to that. Can you believe that?
But I think that's true. So in all film cultures, it's not only India. I think it's a huge graveyard of good films, right? Every culture.
Because all our ambitions, ambition of new filmmaking in this country is socio-political. I mean, there is a reason for that. I'm not saying that. A film which has a socio-political content, not a good film, need not be a good film even, gets a kind of recognition. If not, actually, it becomes a sponsorship rather than governments are actually sponsoring this thing rather than supporting them. They're just sponsoring it.
I think the traditional values are changing now.
Yeah.
I mean,
I hope it will change because Astu had, Anand also knows about that. Astu could not get the main award because of some reasons outside the film itself. I mean, when I say ambition, it's not about the filmmakers, this one. There's a collective. As a collective, we're not actually able to present ourselves in a way in a global context. We need not present
changing,
actually.
so I really disagree with that.
Hmm?
The fact that all the success, there have been so many Indian films, and you would know much more than any of us in this room, how many Indian films have been at festivals. So it's actually telling you that the young generation is totally feeling it differently from a different generation earlier, right?
There is a change. But
Big
that
change.
burden is there. We are still carrying that burden.
It's a journey. Nothing happens overnight. That's
yeah,
normal, no?
We are getting that. And mainly this thing of acceptance is still there. European film festivals or any major festivals, the Indian cinema is still not accepted in the same way as we have started creating new creative spaces in South Asian cinema. Spaces for South Asian cinema is still yet to be created in a big way. And as far as documentary is concerned, I know I have to, because when I started this festival, when we did it in a very small when we did it in a small way, we could give a very big space for documentary cinema. Second International Film Festival, we had a full 7 days, daily 2 shows documentary section in Bangalore International Film Festival. Unfortunately, after the government took over, we have not been able to convince the government. I wish some of you documentary filmmakers should really seek the government that we should have a forum for documentary filmmakers also. It's very important that documentaries makes a part of any important film festival. We should create that festival in Bangalore as well. In fact, it was my second film festival. Sushma was in charge of the Swati and Sushma were in charge of that whole documentary section. For entire week, we ran that.
So I think what Mr. Joyce is talking about also as a festival director, traditionally you would have been only an artistic director.
Yeah.
But what's happening now, the whole thing is becoming so industrial. Artistic directors have to function like CEOs, put out how many delegates came, how many deals were signed, how much money, how much tourism, how much tourist traffic came in. And he'll be sacked, or they won't get city council funding or federal funding or whatever it is to run the festival. So also their roles are adapting as well. So I think it's, yes. So that's why I was talking, it's the whole ecosystem that needs to work. So I think we'll continue the discussion outside. So thank you very, very much for joining us this evening. Really appreciate it. Thank you.